For 3 decades, Johnny Carson wasn't just the host of The Tonight Show. He was America's bedtime ritual. With a razor-sharp wit, that charming grin, and timing that seemed almost supernatural, Carson could turn even the dullest small talk into TV gold. But behind that polished, unshakable image lived a side of Johnny that most viewers never saw. Because when you spend 30 years interviewing thousands of guests, not everything goes smoothly. There were moments that made Johnny visibly squirm, moments that tested his patience, and moments that had him silently fuming while he forced that trademark smile for the cameras. These weren't just awkward bits of live TV. They were rare, unguarded glimpses into the man behind the desk. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on the 27 moments Johnny Carson hated most. From celebrities who pushed his buttons to animal disasters that left the king of late night cringing in his chair, these are the encounters that NBC never wanted you to remember. And trust me, by the time we reach number 1, you'll see Johnny Carson in a way you've never seen him before. Let's dive in. Number 25. Bob Hope's endless self-promotion. On paper, Johnny Carson and Bob Hope were the perfect late-night duo. Hope was a national treasure, and Carson gave him a platform more than anyone else. But behind that easy laugh and warm handshake, Johnny dreaded these appearances. By the 1970s and 80s, Bob Hope wasn't really talking on The Tonight Show anymore. He was reciting. He'd walk out with index cards of pre-written jokes, deliver them no matter what Carson asked, plug his latest NBC special, roll a clip, and then leave. To the audience at home, it seemed like harmless promotion. But for Carson, who thrived on spontaneity, it was torture. Guests who refused to have a real conversation felt like the death of good television. And when producers would inform him, "Bob wants to come on again," Johnny's face would fall. His sigh and the single word, "again," told the whole story. It got even worse as Hope aged. His eyesight and hearing declined, his timing faltered, and sometimes he didn't even seem to register Carson's questions. After one particularly painful segment, Carson turned to his staff backstage and muttered, "If I ever end up like that, somebody just shoot me." For a man who almost never admitted weakness, that was as raw as Johnny got. Number 24. Chevy Chase's hostile interview. If there was one guest who knew how to rub Carson the wrong way, it was Chevy Chase. In 1986, Chase came on to promote Three Amigos, but instead of playing along with Carson's rhythm, he bulldozed right through it. From the second he sat down, Chevy made it his show, talking over Carson, cutting off his questions, and directing his answers straight to the audience instead of the host. That may not sound like a big deal, but in the etiquette of late night, it's one of the cardinal sins. Carson's show was his kingdom, and guests were expected to respect that balance. Chevy didn't. Johnny never lost his cool on camera, but the warning signs were there for anyone paying attention. The clenched jaw, the drumming fingers on his pencil, the smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. When the cameras cut, Johnny let it out. "I don't need that kind of trouble in my life," he told his producer. "Let him go on one of the other shows." And true to his word, Chevy was rarely invited back. Number 23. Myrtle Young's potato chip prank gone wrong. This one wasn't about ego. It was about a prank that went too far. In 1987, Myrtle Young, a sweet older woman with a quirky hobby, came on to show her collection of potato chips shaped like famous figures. Johnny, always ready to stir the pot, waited until she turned her back. Then he grabbed a random chip from his desk, bit into it loudly, and acted like he'd just destroyed one of her prized collectibles. The joke landed with the audience, but not with Myrtle. She spun around in genuine horror, her face collapsing as she gasped. Number 17. The Runaway Chimpanzee. In 1979, a chimp named Mr. Jiggs was supposed to do tricks. Instead, he tore around the stage, yanked at cables, and climbed onto the studio lights, refusing to come down. Carson had no choice but to cut to commercial. When the show returned, he quipped, "And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I prefer human guests." But his irritation was obvious. He hated losing control more than anything. Number 16. The Biting Camel. By 1986, Carson was already cautious. But when zoologist Jim Fowler assured him a camel was safe to feed, Johnny took the bait, literally. The camel snapped at the carrot and caught Carson's fingers instead. His forced smile couldn't hide the pain. Afterward, he quietly implemented a new rule. No more feeding animals. Ever. Number 15. Joan Rivers and the Air Problem. Carson admired Joan Rivers' talent, but her rising fame as his guest host unsettled him. By the mid-80s, NBC executives openly floated her name as his possible replacement. Joan herself hinted at succession talk in interviews, and while she meant it lightly, Carson didn't find it funny. Their professional tension simmered quietly, setting the stage for the betrayal that would later end their friendship forever. Number 14. The tragedy no producer could understand. In 1992, Carson returned to the show after losing his son Ricky in a car accident. At the end of one broadcast, Johnny spoke from the heart about grief, life, and his boy's love of photography. It was raw, unscripted, and deeply human. But off to the side, his longtime producer motioned for him to wrap it up. Carson's fury was instant. He banned the man from the studio floor for the rest of the show's run. For once, the polished host let his personal grief break through, and he would never forgive the intrusion. Number 13. The Divorce Jab. Johnny's divorces were his sorest subject. In 1979, while guest hosting, Tom Snyder joked about Carson's recent split. When Johnny heard about it, he was livid. He considered pulling Snyder from the rotation altogether. From that moment on, Carson tightened the leash. No more talk about his personal life, especially on his own stage. Number 12. Burt Reynolds' water fight. What began as playful banter in 1975 spiraled into disaster when Burt Reynolds dumped an entire pitcher of water on Carson's designer suit. The audience howled, but Johnny's glare told the real story. To him, immaculate appearance was sacred. Soaking wet on live TV? That wasn't comedy. It was humiliation. Number 11. Ed Ames's tomahawk disaster. Not every uncomfortable moment came with anger. Some came with sheer shock. In 1965, Ed Ames demonstrated tomahawk throwing. His throw landed squarely in the wooden target's crotch. The audience roared, Carson froze, then finally cracked the perfect deadpan. That moment lived on as one of the show's most unforgettable, and one that Johnny never quite planned for. The studio once erupted in laughter that refused to die down. For nearly a full minute, the audience was gasping for air, the kind of break where even the cameramen couldn't keep steady. What looked like one of the funniest unscripted moments in television history actually left Johnny Carson frozen in discomfort. This was the early 1960s, and a sexually charged joke had just slipped through live television. Carson, who prided himself on keeping his show smooth and respectable, suddenly worried the network would come down hard on him. Yet with that lightning-fast wit, he tossed out a quip, "I didn't even know you were Jewish," turning tension into gold. But behind his smile, Carson knew he had walked a razor-thin line between comedy brilliance and career controversy. Number 10. Frank Sinatra's hostile takeover. It was 1976, and The Tonight Show should have been Carson's kingdom. But when Frank Sinatra walked onto the stage, the roles flipped instantly. Sinatra wasn't there to be interviewed. He was there to run the show. He interrupted Johnny, controlled the flow of conversation, even asked Johnny the questions as if Carson were the guest. The audience laughed nervously, unsure if it was part of the act, but Carson's tightened jaw told the truth. For the first and maybe only time, Johnny Carson looked like he had lost ownership of his stage. And because Sinatra was untouchable, a living legend, Carson couldn't push back without looking like the villain. Afterward, Carson admitted bitterly, "I felt like a guest on my own damn show." Number 9. Charles Grodin's confrontational ambush. Charles Grodin wasn't just another guest. He came armed with a shtick that flipped late-night etiquette upside down. attacking Johnny directly. During one of his appearances in the early 1990s, Grodin leaned forward and said, "You don't seem prepared for this interview. Did you even read my book?" The crowd gasped. Johnny froze. For a man who mastered the art of controlling the flow, this was mutiny on live television. Carson tried to play along, but Grodin kept needling him, pushing him into defense mode. It became a recurring routine, part act, part insult, that left Carson drained. Backstage, he reportedly muttered that Grodin's visits aged him in dog years. Viewers loved it. Carson hated every second. Number 8. The night the desk collapsed. Johnny Carson's desk wasn't just furniture. It was his fortress, his command center. But one night in 1987, as he tapped his pencil while cracking a joke about shabby movie theaters, the unthinkable happened. The desk collapsed right under his hands. The crowd roared, delighted at the chaos, but Johnny looked shaken. That desk symbolized control, and now it lay in pieces for millions to see. With a forced grin, he quipped, "I broke my desk." Horowitz never had this problem, trying to salvage the moment. The crew scrambled while Carson finished standing up, visibly rattled. What stung him most wasn't just the embarrassment. It was NBC's refusal to update the aging set, despite The Tonight Show's enormous profits. To Carson, it felt like even the stage was betraying him. Number 7. The toilet paper panic. One offhand joke nearly broke America. In December 1973, Carson joked in his monologue about a supposed toilet paper shortage. "I saw it in the papers," he teased. "There's an acute shortage of toilet paper." The audience laughed. But the next day, grocery stores were raided, shelves stripped bare, and an actual shortage was created by Carson's joke alone. For weeks, Americans hoarded rolls, and Carson was horrified. He went on air to apologize. "I don't want to be remembered as the man who created a false toilet paper scare." But it was too late. His punchline had created national chaos. For a man who valued professionalism, realizing he underestimated the raw influence of his words was a wound that never quite healed. Number 6. The Uri Geller debacle. In 1973, Johnny Carson faced down one of the most bizarre guests in Tonight Show history, self-proclaimed psychic Uri Geller. But this time, Johnny had a plan. A skilled amateur magician himself, Carson secretly teamed up with skeptic James Randi. Instead of letting Geller bring his own props, Carson's staff supplied their own spoons, sealed envelopes, and compasses. When the cameras rolled, Geller stalled. He rubbed spoons. He concentrated. Nothing worked. He muttered excuses, claiming he wasn't feeling strong. Carson sat there, smiling politely, knowing he had exposed a fraud on national television. But here's the twist. Geller's career didn't die. It exploded. Audiences saw his failure as proof he must be genuine, because if it were a trick, it would work every time. Carson's attempt to destroy Geller only made him famous, a bitter irony Johnny never forgave himself for. Number 5. Charlie Callis, banned forever. Charlie Callis had been a regular guest, known for goofy sound effects and slapstick antics. But in 1982, his career with Carson ended in a heartbeat. After one of his jokes bombed, Johnny teased him with a playful sound effect. Callis, desperate to save face, shoved Carson on camera. The audience laughed, but Carson's eyes went cold. "Don't ever do that to me again," he snapped. Backstage, his decision was swift. Callis would never appear on The Tonight Show again. And he didn't. Carson could take a joke. What he couldn't take was someone crossing into his personal space. Number 4. Don Rickles breaks the cigarette box. In 1976, Don Rickles, the king of insults, accidentally smashed one of Carson's most prized possessions, a wooden cigarette box that sat on his desk every night. It wasn't just a prop. It was Johnny's personal item from home. When Rickles knocked it over and cracked it, Carson's mask slipped for just a second, irritation flashing across his face before the host in him regained control. Viewers thought it was just another gag. But behind the scenes, Johnny was fuming. That broken box was proof. You could tease Johnny all you wanted, but touch his personal belongings, and you'd see the real man behind the legend. Number 3. Farrah Fawcett's disastrous interview. In 1980, Farrah Fawcett, fresh off her Charlie's Angels fame, sat across from Carson. What should have been an easy interview spiraled into chaos. Farrah rambled, lost her train of thought, and wandered through half-formed stories. Carson tried everything, redirecting questions, cutting in, but nothing worked. The audience squirmed. Carson's rhythm was shattered. When the cameras finally cut, he was furious. He blamed the booking team for putting him in an impossible spot. For a man whose cardinal rule was never lose control of the show, this was one of the worst nights of his career. Number 2. Wayne Newton's explosive confrontation. Johnny Carson made a few jokes about Wayne Newton's high-pitched voice. He thought they were harmless. Wayne didn't. When Newton appeared as a guest in 1981, he walked on stage burning with anger. Instead of small talk, he confronted Carson head-on, saying, "I don't appreciate being made fun of. I've been a gentleman long enough." The tension was suffocating. During commercial breaks, the argument escalated, with Newton making veiled threats. Carson sat there, face tight, knowing the audience could sense the hostility. For the first time, his own stage didn't feel safe. Newton wouldn't appear again for years. Number 1. Joan Rivers's betrayal. This one cut deeper than all the rest. For years, Joan Rivers wasn't just Carson's guest. She was his protégé, his chosen guest host, part of his circle. Then, without warning, she signed a deal with Fox to host her own competing late-night show. Johnny didn't hear it from her. He heard it from gossip. And the night before the news broke, Joan had been on his show, smiling, laughing, even wearing the same dress she'd worn on her first appearance. She said nothing. When Carson found out, his fury was volcanic. He never spoke to her again. He banned her from NBC, and the ban lasted until after his death. For Johnny, it wasn't about competition. It was about loyalty. And once betrayed, Johnny Carson never forgave. These weren't just awkward moments. They were cracks in the armor of America's most trusted host. And in those cracks, audiences caught a glimpse of the real Johnny Carson. Not just the charming legend, but the man behind the smile, fiercely protective of his dignity, his control, and his stage.